Well, thank you very much for that, Matt. I don't think we really need to do any formal introductions, but we might as well for the sake of brevity. I will be the host. My name is Nate, lost in time and space. I'm kind of the head guy here at the Great Old Ones Gaming, but I certainly could not do this show alone, and I have two lovely co-hosts with me here today.
I am the man from Lang, host of the Whisper in Darkness YouTube channel.
And I'm Innkeeper Vase Odin from the Twisted Tentacle Inn.
And Vase, thank you very much for joining us while you're on vacation. I know it's a very special time for you in your life, so we appreciate you taking the time to do that. And as well,
this is for the world, though.
And we're also joined with, I'm sure you need no introduction, but I will hopefully do it justice. We have senior card game designer Maxine Newman, as well as game designer the Duke as well. And we want to just take a quick moment to thank you both for joining us today. It's lovely having you here, and just great to be here raising money for a great cause.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. And thank you for doing this. Like, this is such a cool thing that you guys do.
Yeah, this is super cool.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I've been admittedly going down many rabbit holes figuring out all the tech things, but that's neither here nor there at this point.
The tricky part is if this is Return to Horrors Without Borders, then what's next year going to be? Is like Return to like
it'll be the box set, the premium box set.
Horrors Without Borders revised.
There you go. Revised. There we go.
Yeah.
There we go. The point of no return. Perfect. All right. I think that's the name for next year. Or we could do something like third edition. I'm sure the creative people in this community will figure out something. But I mean, we're here for fun, but we're also here to prod the two of you. You know, since you are the designers of the game that we have come here to celebrate and raise money for charity for. I know that, Vase, you have collected a slew of questions from patrons of the show, so why don't we start with those, and then we can go on to some questions from chat.
We definitely have, but do you want to let people know where they can send in questions that are viewers that are watching?
Oh, if you just type in !Q into the chat and then submit your question, I will be able to select from all the questions that have been submitted so far today.
Perfect. So the first question is from a friend of the show, Sub-Zero Go. So this one's kind of long, so let me take a little breath here and find it, actually. So the Good Podcast recently stated that the state of the game heads in a very positive direction, that no matter what happens, the game is so well loved by the community, it'll see, oh my God, excuse me, it'll see plays even after the line is eventually discontinued or as the thought awakens, whichever comes first. For Sub-Zero Joe, he regards it as a work of art. But his question is regarding the community that has evolved around the game. One of the brightest and most positive gaming communities out there, and this event here is a show of that, even rallying for charities and whatnot. If other game designers were to try and take tips from you, what valuable lessons have you learned about initiating or influencing the growth of a community within your game? And any particular lessons about its first reactions or the longevity of the game?
Well, so for one thing, I do want to say that, like, he's absolutely right. Like, the state of the game is fantastic right now. The community is absolutely wonderful. And I don't know. I don't know if I can take credit for any of that. Like, I think that's all of you, like all of the players who have gotten together and done this, and like the podcasts and the content creators who consistently like make videos and reviews and playthroughs and stuff for people to engage with. Like, I don't know if it's right for me to like give advice on like how to curate that community, because I feel like you guys did that. I feel like you should be answering that question. You know what I mean? Like, but yeah, like this community is absolutely fantastic. Easily like the safest space I've ever felt in a gaming like space. And I do want to say like the future of the game is really bright. And actually, maybe I'll take this time to introduce Duke to you since that's relevant. So Duke is a new hire, well, relatively new, right? Like it's like 6 months ago at this point. Yeah. And I begged and pleaded to allow him to get him onto this team, because I really wanted him to work on Arkham. He really wanted to work on Arkham. So in the future, you will see more of him, I'm sure.
Yeah, I want to just add in, like, the community for this game is just such a wonderful thing to participate in and be part of. It definitely is, from everyone just chipping in and thinking about, like, bringing that positive spirit to the game. Even though the game makes you suffer and die and cry over and over again when you draw the auto fail or whatever. Yeah, thank you all for being so great.
Duke, you know you've been sacrificed multiple times to Shub-Niggurath, right?
Oh, yeah.
Ending many campaigns.
This is not even my final form.
Awesome. Great answers. So we have another question from friend of the show, Solar J. And the question is, do you have a mechanic that either of you are particularly proud of?
Oh, for sure. I mean, there's so many. There's definitely a lot. So I do this every time. Every time I always like talk about like the thing I can't talk about. But there's some stuff coming up after Edge of the Earth that I'm particularly proud of. Because I just went ham. But as far as like existing stuff, I think I'm really proud of how the Bless and Curse tokens came out. You know, it's always worrisome when you go back to like a foundational game element and create something new that's supposed to like really alter like such a core facet of the game. And in some games, when they try to do that, it doesn't hit well. And it ends up like, you know, being a big sticking point for the community. And I'm sure that there are a bunch of people who don't like Bless and Curse tokens, but I think overall they've gotten like a really healthy, positive reception. And I'm really excited to maybe, I don't know, explore them again at some point. But for now, it's just self-contained to Ismith. And I think that like, I got a lot of people saying like, oh, I wish these were just in the core set. And I'm like, oh, that's good. Because that makes me feel like it was a good design that people really enjoyed. So
yeah, I mean, that has to be like one of the biggest compliments, I feel, because it means like the mechanic was so well designed that it feels sort of inherent to the game, or sort of axiomatic to the way the game plays.
Yeah, you want to, if you're adding a new feature like that, you want people to feel like, how did I ever play the game without this? Like it's such a natural fit. And so I'm really glad that that's how it came out. So yeah.
And Mateo loves you for it.
Well, I hate to interrupt.
Man from Lang's favorite investigator.
Well, I hate to interrupt, but speaking of positive things that have gone down very well, Asasani has donated $50 to Doctors Without Borders. His message is, great cause, great entertainment, many thanks to everyone involved. We also have a $60 donation from Turbinismo. Turbinismo is part of the Los Archivos de Arkham podcast, part of this wonderful international community that has been built around this game. Turbinismo says, hola, thanks for the amazing initiative once again, folks. Goog, FTW, exclamation point. We also have another $50 donation from the entirety of Los Archivos de Arkham saying, great job making this possible. And we also have a $200 donation from Sub-Zero Joe. Sub-Zero Joe says, great effort by the Great Old Ones Gaming and everyone to put this event together. Events like this are the reason I believe Arkham Horror the card game is one of, if not the best, gaming communities. Lots of love from down under in Australia. Thank you so much, everyone. That puts us at over $1,600 out of our goal of $5,000 this evening. Keep it up, everyone. Let's push for that 2,000.
Matt, before we get back to it, since we're talking donations, does that mean we already hit the 300 goal for this segment? Because we're matching dollar for dollar the first 300.
We
that's done
have
in this
yes.
segment.
We have yes. That's
Wow.
right. The great old ones. We matching the first $300 of donations, so that effectively puts us at
Wow.
1960. So let's push for now. We got to push for the next unlock that happens at 2,500. Let's do it, everyone. Let's get the word out and let's go for 2,500.
Hell yeah.
Amazing. Dukes, so back to that question, is there any mechanic that you like that you're proud of? I know you're fairly new to this game, but you did design a scenario, didn't you, for Arkham?
Yeah. When I was an intern.
Is there any mechanic maybe from? Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, back when I was an intern, and Maxine was sort of laying out what I could take on as a project, and I was able to take on the light in the fog scenario. And I think that when I was designing that scenario, I was really inspired a lot by a lot of the old survival horror games like Clock Tower or Haunting Ground,
Clock
where you're
Tower.
just running away. So that definitely inspired, the idea of this kind of unstoppable enemy who's stalking you through, the lighthouse and then the tunnels. But I think if I had to say something that I was happiest with, or it wasn't a huge mechanical step, but the nursemaids and the hatchlings were something that I thought I really wanted to explore the idea of, okay, these are creatures who are a family, and I wanted them to feel like they were family even when you were playing it. So I think they're my favorite thing that came out of that in a lot of ways. How they sort of
You made us feel so bad for killing those things.
And if I remember correctly, you wrote all of the art briefs for that scenario as well. So you wrote the art brief, the somewhat heart-wrenching art brief of the nursemaid like cradling the in like the shallow waters. I love that one.
Yeah, I was so happy with how that turned out. And like, even the hatchling, I wanted it to be like, I wanted it to be super cute, but also, what's it eating?
Yeah. Yes. That's a tough question for Duke to answer, though, because Duke's been hard at work on a lot of stuff that he can't tell you about.
That's fair. That's fair.
It's classified.
Yes, it's classified. Yes.
I guess that just means we'll have to have you back on the show at some point so that we can discuss those after those products have been released.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, totally.
So we actually have another question from Solar J, who just asked the previous question. What was the most amusing playtest moment or feedback that you received that you can tell us about? And this might take a few moments for you to think back on, but that's an interesting question.
I remember having lots of great moments all the way from like before the game ever came out. Back when we were playtesting The Gathering just over and over and over again, because it was the only scenario that existed at the time. And I remember we had so many fun moments. It was like one of the reasons why, like, I think upper management got so on board with this game so quickly is because every time we played it with them, they came out of it with like a hilarious story. Like the time that Nate killed someone with medical texts, or the time that I barricaded my boss into a room with the ghoul priest and just let him die. Like just stuff like that, where you're just like, I can't believe this game can actually do that. And so yeah, those are just really memorable moments from like very, very early on.
It's funny you mentioned medical text killing people. I demoed the game at Necronomicon back in 2019, and I had a group that wanted to do nothing more than try to kill each other with medical text. He had a player dynamite blast everyone in the room with the ghoul priest and killed the Daisy and the Agnes in one action.
that counts as two, right? Did it at least kill the ghoul priest too?
No.
Awesome.
I think I'll pass on the question for now.
All right, fair enough. So we had someone on the chat. Are you guys both familiar with Delta Green, the role-playing game? Okay, cool. So maybe all of us, including the great old ones, can put in their 2 cents here. So someone asked, if we look into the future of the Arkham File setting, just as the investigators just go on with their lives, which ones will end up working for Delta Green?
I love that. It's such a good question. Okay, so let's see.
Trish, without a doubt.
Yeah,
She's
Trish.
already working for Delta Green.
I feel like Trish, Roland, Mark Harrigan, maybe. I could see Tommy.
You just get pulled into it, like, whoa.
Right, yeah, you're just like, you think you're working for one agency, and then all of a sudden...
I got a tinfoil hat theory for you. I think Rex ends up being like a conspiracy theory nut job. So he ends up getting recruited through Phenomenex, which is like the settings like conspiracy magazine.
I like that.
And he gets sent as like a canary in the coal mine.
I like that a lot.
That's the buddy comedy I want to see happen. Like, dang it, Rex, you did it again. I'm wild. I got these theories.
Man from Lang, I know your answer is Father Mateo.
For what? For joining Delta Green?
Yeah, for anything.
Well, it's only fun bashing Mateo when you're around base, you know.
I think Mark Harrigan will go anywhere there's monsters to kill. I think maybe Tony Morgan too, for the same reason.
Maybe Zoe for the same reason.
Maybe, but I feel like Delta Green wouldn't recruit someone who's a little unstable, maybe.
True.
I don't know if that's even like necessarily the angle for that character, but like, I don't know, it feels like you need to have some kind of military or investigative background rather than just be a chef who's good at stabbing and claims to talk to God.
She's probably the operation more than the agent at that point.
Someone in chat said Wendy.
Wendy. There's always been a lot of questions about like, what does Wendy do when she grows up? And even like among the members of the Arkham story team, that's very much like in debate. Like, not that that's ever something that we're going to explore, but just like we always like to talk about it. And we always thought that the Wendy Adams Nazi hunter was a fun angle.
She needs me them caps. Oh, that's hilarious. So here's a question from patron of the show, Northern Lights Over Arkham, JP. Thank you very much for the question. And he asks, what's your favorite tarot card from the Return to the Circle Undone and why?
Ooh.
In terms of art or mechanics?
Yes.
Okay.
Both.
I think in terms of art, I like the World Tarot. It's just like the perfectly Arkham version of the World, where it's just like, here's the Earth and the Moon, and then like it's very clearly being devoured, and also looks, yeah, there you go, and also looks pretty insignificant in the face of whatever that thing is. Yeah, the World is my favorite. I think the Moon is maybe my second favorite. I just like planetary bodies. Like, I don't know what it is. And but as far as mechanics, let's see. As far as mechanics, I like the ones that give you kind of long-term consequences, like the one that gives you extra experience or less experience if it's reversed, or the trauma one. Like, those ones are pretty cool because they don't actually affect the game as you're playing them. They just make you scared or like worried that like you're gonna lose something or that you might not gain the bonus that you set out to gain. So I think those are cool.
I'm a big fan of the Chariot. I just like I like the kind of kineticism in it, or how it's just got this beautiful feeling of motion even as you're looking at it.
That one's cool.
I don't know. They all have hurt me though, so I don't know if I have a favorite one mechanically. I've just been hurt too much.
The High Priestess is really cool too. Oh my god, I forgot about the Lovers. That one gets me. That one's really good. Yeah.
I mean, here's a question I'll throw out. Is there a possibility of getting an art book for all the tarot cards?
I believe we already did an art book through Dark Horse, which I already packed, so I can't show it to you. And I don't think the tarot cards are in there, or maybe some of them are. But yeah, there is an art book for Arkham buy it. It's really good. I don't think the tarot cards are in there though. I could be wrong.
I don't think they are.
Yeah, I think it came out right before. Yeah, there it is. Yeah. You can find it at bookstores near you, like Barnes & Noble.
Obligatory plug there.
Yeah, along with the Aconite novels. It's just like, do a full plug. Like,
Nate's been reading those Aconite novels, and he's been reviewing them, and they seem pretty interesting. Lots of good ones.
Yeah, they're good.
I think they're quite good. I liked Mask of Silver quite a bit.
Yeah, that one's probably my favorite so far. I also like. Well, there's more coming down the pipeline that I really like. I really liked the Devour Below compilation.
That one was really good. Yeah,
that one was awesome for me because I was sitting there like I created these characters like in a vacuum, like years ago. Like Lita Chandler, I wrote out a whole backstory for Lita Chandler that you never really explore in Night of the Zealot because it was just for fluff, right? Like it was just for internal use. You know what I mean? I never thought that we'd revisit it for any reason. And then all of a sudden they're like, yeah, Aconite is doing a short story anthology and they want to explore the core set story because we're making a new core set. So what kind of stories can we tell? And I'm like, Lita Chandler, like, here, just take this. It's just like a whole outline of her life. It's perfect.
Yeah, and the book does more than just like go into Lita. It goes into a bunch of Arkham Files characters, which is really cool.
Yeah, Ruth Turner, who's my favorite of the Immordoth like cultists, has a whole chapter about like her story and how she gets roped into the cult and stuff like that. And it's really great, really great. It's really great. And there's some sweet queer representation too. So.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right.
Oh, yeah.
Ruth has a girlfriend in that story.
Indeed.
Is there a possibility? Here's another random question for you. Speaking of the novels, is it a possibility that some of those characters get transferred into the games?
Is it a possibility? Yes, it could happen. Is it like a de facto thing that we can easily do? Not necessarily. So those characters are like owned by Aconite. So we would have to like work together with them to get that to happen. If it ever happened, we'd probably have to commission new art for them. So it would be a whole deal. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's definitely a possibility. It's something I've thought about. I think it'd be really cool. Can't guarantee it'll ever happen, but it'd be neat.
Unfortunate logistics, but it is what it is. That'd be really cool though, because there's some really interesting characters. I don't know if you've read Wrath of Nakai, but that one features Alessandro Zorzi, one of my personal favorite characters, I think, now in the grand Arkham Files IP. She's great.
I think Alessandra would be like the #1 like obvious choice, right? For like an LCG card. I think so. I
mean, just having that subtitle, "The Acquisitionist," on her investigator card is just
yeah.
All right, so let's see.
So you guys have made some partnerships for short stories and novels. Maxine, you wrote a story. Sub-Zero Joe said that he caught that you wrote a story for the Investigators of Arkham book. Which story did you write?
I did not write a story for the Investigators of Arkham book.
I guess you were credited on there as part of one of the story writers. So he thought maybe you
credited.
Did.
So I was part of the story group, which is a group of Arkham experts, I guess, who just basically just read through everything and like made comments on it, made edits, suggestions where necessary, and like, you know what I mean, that kind of thing. I didn't write anything. I just helped. I was IP police.
Well, thanks for clarifying that. Yeah, there was, I guess, some confusion. So we weren't sure, and when he brought that up, I'm like, oh, maybe she did write something. So on the story and the art for Arkham Files characters, they're so pulp based. I mean, it just lends so well to comic books. Have you guys ever thought of maybe delving into comic books or making partnerships with a comic book publishing house?
I would love that.
I know you worked with Dark Horse, right, for the tarot thing you said, right?
Yeah. So, well, the Dark Horse was for the art book. But yes, we've worked with Dark Horse before. For the art book, we're also making an Android art book. So like that is a possibility for the future, but it's definitely not something I can like confirm or deny right now. I think it'd be really cool though.
It'd be super cool. I would love to see some of the scenarios that we play in comic book form. I think it'd be awesome. And maybe take like someone's real play experience and translate the actual game into a comic book story. I think that would be really fun. Kind of an Easter egg, one of the play testers or developers. I think it'd be really fun.
I would hope it would be the Forgotten Age. If it's going to be any campaign, it's got to be the Forgotten Age.
No, why do you say that? I'm just curious.
Why do I say that?
Yeah, I'm just curious.
Because it's the best campaign.
It is. I agree. It's my favorite campaign.
That's our bias here. We don't speak about Mateo, and we love the Forgotten Age.
My favorite campaign is Redacted.
Oh,
Redacted.
Well, okay. Here's a question for Duke. Manastrophic asks, what was your first experience with Arkham Horror, the card game, and what investigator did you first play?
Well, I was still coming out of grieving Netrunner in some ways, and I remember going into my local game store, and I saw I saw on the shelf, I was like, wait, there's an Arkham Horror card game, and the person who was manning the shop was just like, oh yeah, that just came out, and so I guess my tender young heart was like, okay, well, this will fill the void that Netrunner will leave behind, and I took it back to my apartment, and I played it with one of my best friends, and I think my first character I picked was Daisy. Actually, I was like,
hell yeah, gotta pick.
Yeah, I mean, she knows her books, and I think we just totally died, but it just kept me coming back for more.
And speaking of coming back for more, let's see, we have a $40 donation from Comrade Sim. Comrade Sim says, great event, folks. Carry on.
Nice.
All right, let's see here. Let's see. Here's a question from Nicholas Corey. Is that how you pronounce that?
Hey, Nick.
He's asking, when will we get a dinosaur in the game? Which I'm assuming is a very serious question.
God damn it, Nick. Oh.
I will say, I've been playing a lot of Weird West Call of Cthulhu lately, and there is a precedent for it.
I feel like if we were going to put a dinosaur in the game, it would have been in Machinations Through Time, right?
It's not too late.
Already had time traveling and everything, so...
I mean, what's your definition of dinosaur? Because Forgotten Age has serpent people.
There you go. Yeah, and the winged serpents, which are basically dinosaurs, so yeah.
Prehistoric, basically.
Just play the Forgotten Age, Nick.
Have you played the Forgotten Age?
Nick, have you played Clutches of Chaos?
That's going to be the new meme. We'll just have pictures of Nick, and we'll just say, have you played the Forgotten Age?
Lake Xochimilco has a dinosaur. There you go.
Yeah, God, have you played the Forgotten Age? Like,
in all honesty, like with Arkham, you never know what's going to happen. Like every campaign, I like to throw twists and turns and all kinds of weird stuff. So who knows? Maybe sometime we'll have a dinosaur in the game. But until then, Nick can terrorize me with dinosaurs in his D&D campaign. So, it's even.
Oh, how's that going? Are you guys done with, was it Rime of the Frost Maiden? Or?
Rime of the Frost Maiden was like a year ago. Call of Cthulhu is what we were playing recently. We were playing Horror on the Orient Express. Express. I can't talk. I'm very tired. With Josh Parrish as our keeper, and we won. We did it.
Nice.
And we're going to be starting up D&D next month.
Very nice. That's a difficult campaign too.
Oh yeah. I had 6 sanity left at the end. Out of starting sanity of like 87.
Yeah, it's like once you get to that point where you like become mythos hardened, it actually becomes pretty difficult to lose lots of sanity. So your character.
Well, we were playing pulp version, so we were playing on easy mode.
I don't know if I'd call it easy mode. Listen,
I mean, okay, we were playing on easier mode. How's that?
I take issue with that as a Pulp Cthulhu player. But it is true. It is easier, quote unquote, because your characters don't die in one instance.
Easier.
As long as you've got 30 luck, you can just spend it all and survive.
Very true.
So.
That's very true. Ah, that's such a great mechanic.
Yeah.
But speaking of mechanics and sort of the design process that goes on about the game, JP asks, what is your favorite part of designing campaigns or scenarios?
Oh. That's a tough one. I would say there's 2 points in the process that I really, really enjoy. The first is when the narrative is fully written, even if it's a first draft and it's an early draft and it kind of sucks. When the narrative is fully written and I get to watch playtesters make choices that they don't really know what the outcome's going to be, and maybe they're role-playing their characters or something, that's like the first time in the process I get to really see it start to come together. Where they'll be like, oh, I don't know, like, what should we do here? And it's the first time I'm like watching them play like the players will, instead of just mapping everything out and playing like a playtester. You know what I mean? So that's really fun. And then also at the very, very end, when all of the art is finished and all of the graphic design is finished and we're actually building the cards and we're like slapping everything together, and it's just this feeling of like everything coming together. Like I'm being kind of redundant, but like it just feels so like, oh, it's real now. All the stuff that was in my head like 6 months ago, now it's real. That's a great feeling. And also like when looking at like proofs from the factory, it's like, I can hold this in my hands. It's great.
I would imagine it's a very similar feeling when you first got your book in your hands too.
Oh God, yes. Yeah. Although that was even more, I would say that was like the same feeling, but times 10, because unlike Arkham's a huge group effort. I mean, like an enormous group effort. We have the developers, we have our producer, Molly Glover, we have the art team, graphic design. We have people on the production team over at Asmodee. We've got the people in the factory in China. It's an enormous process with tons and tons of people. But when I first held Dark Drifters in my hand, I wept like a fucking child. Sorry if I'm not allowed to curse. I apologize. Because it was pretty much me. It was me. And it was done, and there it was, and I could like read it, and that was like so thrilling to me. Yes, sorry.
Oh no, that's totally fine. You know, I'm gonna give you a little surprise here. So I'm actually a secretary for my school's literary club, and I proposed that we team up with the LGBT club at our school to read your book for our campus reads book. So that's happening.
What? When?
It'll be classes start in 2 weeks, so it'll be like a campus thing that we'll be doing.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow, thank you so much. That's amazing.
It's also an excuse for me to finally read the fucking
I mean, thank you so much. I'm like overwhelmed. That's so cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought, you know, especially like that age group, you know, when you're trying to figure that kind of stuff out in your life can be really difficult. Yeah. So
what school? High school, middle school?
College.
College. Okay. Also perfect. Yes.
I mean, I know I look like I'm 13, but
no, I thought you were maybe like on staff or something.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh, that is far too nice of you.
I don't know. Well, thank you so much. That's amazing.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
Cool.
I'll be in touch with you more about it in the future, but
yeah, I hope you like it.
I'm sure I will. Like I've read a couple chapters of it already, so I know I'm going to be at least enthused by it, to say the least. But moving on to some other questions, we have a question from.
Don't move on from mechanics. I got a mechanics question.
Okay.
So, Just a little insight into the design process for mechanics. So I'm really curious. The investigators of not the investigators of Arkham, but the investigator packs. Those were all new investigators for the most part. So when you were designing the new investigators or the design team, do you generally start with the mechanic for those investigators and then build the investigator, their story, and all that around the mechanic, or is it vice versa? You come up with an idea for a character and then you build the mechanics around that.
So it kind of differed depending on the character. There was a mix of all of that. For like Harvey and who is the other one that wasn't new? Why am I blanking?
So I think it was just Harvey that wasn't new, right?
No, Jacqueline.
Yeah, Jacqueline was.
Harvey and Jacqueline, those characters were already sort of ingrained in the Arkham IP. So when we decided that those were going to be the Seeker and the Mystic, respectively, it was kind of like, okay, what are they good at? Let's just put their mechanics into the game. For Harvey, card draw made sense. It was also like a very basic Seeker mechanic that we hadn't really like focused on with an investigator. And then for Jacqueline, it's just she's psychic. So chaos token probability manipulation makes sense. But for the other three investigators, it was definitely the other way around. We wanted to create characters who felt very diverse and unique and like weren't just like rehashes of stereotypes or cliches or things that are already present in the roster, because we have 50 plus investigators in the IP. So we wanted to make sure that these characters felt really different. So for Nathaniel, when we came up with the boxer, with Winifred, who was originally like the daredevil, so like basically having like a daredevil attitude, like approach to the game. And for Stella, like all of those were much more theme first and then mechanics. Except for maybe Stella, for a long time, I've wanted to make a survivor character who was like, got something good when they failed. And it just made perfect sense for it to be Stella, because like as a postal worker, you're sort of like, you know, you have this this idea that you have to constantly like move forward and like keep going, neither rain nor snow, right? So it just kind of made sense. But like Nathaniel wrote himself, right? You punch things and then they die.
It sounds so simple when you say it, but coming up with the idea of events being a part of it and the boxing gloves, like it all works so well. You know, it's looking at it from the outside in, it just seems like a complex design, you know, at least the innovation of it, you know. But I think that's what makes Arkham so unique, and part of the big appeal for Arkham is the wide variety of investigators and how different they each are and how unique in their mechanics, and their mechanics just like really tell their story. It's done so well. I just can't compliment it enough.
Thank you. Yeah, for like Nathaniel and for Lily as well, it would have been really simple, I think, to just have an ability that's like, oh, when you attack unarmed, like when you attack without using a weapon or something, you just do bonus damage. But the problem is, and like if it was a board game, that would be perfectly fine. But as a card game, you always want to encourage people to draw and play cards, because that's the mechanic. If their ability was that they punch hard and that's it, then you're as powerful at the start of the game as you are at the end of the game. There's no ramp up. There's no why draw cards, why play cards. You can just punch things. So we wanted to build a character who felt like they weren't fighting with weapons because they were punching things. And the easiest way to do that was through events. And then for Lily, I wanted to focus on the idea that like a martial artist could have weapons that are melee focused or just not guns, right? So you got the dragon pole, you've got the butterfly swords, and of course you can also just punch a lot. And you're kind of like a monk from D&D with like a flurry of blows, like whap, whap, whap. And like each punch only does 1 damage, but you can like rapid fire, you know? That's,
and speaking of rapid fire, we have the donations are coming in rapidly. Gorfax, who runs the Arkham Horror Living Card Game subreddit, has donated $40 to Doctors Without Borders. He says, thanks to all of the content creators and community members that come together for great causes like this. Forever grateful for the friends, experiences, and horrors over the last 6 years. Thank you so much, Gorfax.
So we recently finished up a massive game of the Blob, and there was a question that popped up while we were playing from... I'm going to butcher that, so I'm not even going to pronounce their username, but they will be on screen so everyone can see it. But they ask, was there anything deemed too silly to put on the reality acid effects?
Oh my god, yes. We probably narrowed it down by about half. I think there were originally like at least twice as many. And we cut out a bunch for different reasons. We cut out some that we actually play tested and turned out to be really inconvenient. We cut out any that might be awkward for someone with a disability or something. We cut out, we cut out some that were only jokes and had no mechanical effects. What else? Yeah, I mean, we made so many cuts. I don't even remember most of them anymore. Like there was one where it was like, it devours your what was it? It devours your chair and you have to stand for the rest of the game. And we cut that one out because I was like, if I'm at Gen Con and I've been walking around for like 7 hours and my feet really hurt, I want to sit. Like, please don't. If you make me stand, I will just fail. Like, it's not gonna happen. That kind of thing. So like, yeah, we cut out a bunch of jokes. We cut out. Wasn't there one? Oh, maybe we kept that one in. Did we keep in the one where it devours your house? I don't remember if we kept that or not.
It's about electricity. I don't remember getting the house ever that I when I played it.
There is an effect that devours the card your house.
Yes. Okay.
From,
yes. Yeah. That one. We almost cut that one. I kept it in because I thought it was really funny.
You know, I don't.
You should have
ever drawn that one.
The IRS. Don't pay any taxes this year.
There was one. I don't remember what it actually devoured, but there was one that was supposed to be like if you draw 2 auto fails, which is physically impossible because there's only one auto fail in the bag. It did something that was extremely silly, and it was just there as a joke. And then during a playtest, it actually happened because someone was playing Daisy and they had the Necronomicon out, and they were like, "Oh, it counts as an auto fail," and I was like, "Oh." Yeah, it ate Arkham Horror, the card game. That's what it was. Yeah, people in chat are reminding me. Oh,
that must have been a fun scenario to design.
There was I do remember one. There was one in playtesting that it devours the event organizer, and if it devours the event organizer, I was gonna go like and then like run out of the room like I'm being devoured. And then they have to play the rest of the event without me.
Oh my god. That would happen to Nathan. Nathan would go through the trouble of like putting an event together and then he'd get devoured.
Oh god. That one got cut for obvious reasons.
So I've got a personal question for you. So there's been a lot of hubbub about Investigator starter decks in general, but you know, while we've seen the precedent for player cards to come out without an associated story behind them, is it possible that there's room for associated stories without investigators? So maybe not something to the effect of like a full campaign like Edge of the Earth, but maybe somewhere in between.
I mean, that's kind of what like our standalone scenarios are, right? Like,
well, more like a
like
mini campaign. Like, say if you were to take like half of Dream Eaters and release that as its own thing or something like that.
Right. Well, with the new packaging style, like it used to be that the rule of thumb was we always have to bundle player cards with scenario cards. Now it's almost the opposite, where it's like we don't want to bundle scenario cards with player cards. We want them to be separate. So, I mean, yeah, that is always a possibility. That being said, I am only human, and I can only produce a certain amount of content per year, or I will jump off a cliff.
You say that as
So-
you spawn a third tentacle coming out of your back or something like
Right,
that.
Yeah. So, we'll see. We'll see what the future holds. I want to keep making Arkham content until my fingers bleed. So we'll see.
I don't
And
think.
now Duke can help me.
I'm here. Want to be the best boy. Want to help.
We just throw treats into Duke's mouth and he designs cards.
Yep, pretty much.
I have a question about the design. Is it challenging to balance the when you're designing a scenario? Is it challenging to balance the sort of the clear objectives that investigators need to achieve with the randomness? We've seen quite a few scenarios, like ones that come to mind, like Before the Black Throne or Devil Reef and stuff like that, where you've sort of got a lot of different random things going on. Is that what sort of challenge is that like?
Yeah. So if you take a sliding scale, like imagine a sliding scale that goes between scripted and random, right? If it was fully scripted, right? Like fully 100% scripted, what cards you have, what order they come out in, what order all of the encounter cards come out in, that sort of thing, then we could curate it to feel really, really well balanced and really well like well scripted, right? Like everything happens in exactly the right order. And the downside to that is there's not a lot of replayability, right? Once you play it, you've experienced it, that's it, you move on. And you see the same thing in video games, right? And on the other hand, is like completely random. Everything's completely random. You never know what's going to happen. Highly replayable, because every time you play, it's going to be totally different. But also like maybe so random that it almost feels like a moot point. Like, why am I even playing this, right? We ideally want our scenarios to fall somewhere in the middle. There's like a sweet spot where it feels like it's a little scripted, but it's random enough that every time you play it, those scripted events happen a little differently. And then some scenarios can fall a little bit more in the random side. Some are a bit more scripted and so on and so forth. So there are definitely some scenarios that are more random, some scenarios that are a lot more scripted. Like I would say like something like, what's a good example? Something like The Secret Name or the
Devil Reef.
yeah.
Devil Reef.
Well, like, but even Devil Reef has like the various islands, and the islands can play out differently. And I think there's even one island you don't use, if I'm correct, if I'm remembering correctly. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But like some scenarios, it's like actually The Gathering, right? That is probably the most scripted scenario in the entire game. The Gathering. You're always gonna leave the study, go to the hallway, go to the attic, go to the cellar, go to the parlor, fight the ghoul priest, or run away. That's the end point, is the only thing that's unscripted. But then there are some scenarios that are like, who knows what's going to happen? It's like so random. So I think the healthy mix of randomness and scripted events is a good thing. And we don't want every single scenario to fall in that exact sweet spot. We want it to fall in like a range. That way, if you're a player who likes randomness, you have got those scenarios to keep replaying. Like Depths of Yoth is like a perfect example of a very random, very highly replayable scenario. And if you're not, then you've got those really heavily scripted scenarios that you can play through.
Is that something that comes out as you're designing, or is it something you're looking at before when you sit down to design the scenario? Does it come out naturally, or is it you sit down and say, okay, I think this one we have specific story points we need to hit, so this one's going to perhaps land on the less random side versus one that is a little more open-ended and you can give it a little more replayability?
Yeah, I would say it's a little bit of both, like depending on the scenario. Like there are definitely some scenarios where we go into it thinking like, yeah, this is definitely going to be one of the more random scenarios, and we're okay with that. Or yeah, this is definitely going to be one of the more scripted scenarios. And then there are other scenarios where we just design what makes sense at the time, and wherever it falls on that scale is just where it is. And if it's too far in one direction, we'll maybe take action to peel it back a little bit and bring it closer to that center. But most times we just do what makes sense for the story, and it just plays out the way it plays out. For Before the Black Throne, for example, since you brought that one up, that was one I didn't go into it thinking it was going to be super duper random. But the way that the Cosmos deck played out and the way that I wanted the mechanics to work, it ended up kind of being that way. And I was content with that. Whereas for some scenarios, it's like, no, it pretty much has to play out like this in order for the story to make sense.
And
just like, oh, go ahead.
No, go on. Just one other question. As any idea when we'll be getting a new FAQ?
That is a very, very good question. I don't know.
Excellent question.
I've been hard at work collecting lots of questions. Part of the new package style is, instead of getting an entire cycle's worth of FAQ content like slowly over the course of half a year, we got them all immediately, right? So it's been a lot to go through.
Well, you know how the reviewers feel now.
Oh, God. Yeah, I know. Sort of just an awkward side effect of things. And also, like, I've just been, like, so busy. It sounds like a cop-out answer. But the truth is, I'm hoping to have it vaguely soon, within the next couple months. But I can't guarantee, and I can't set a date.
Soon registered trademark?
Soon, when it's ready. When it's ready.
That's the classic chef answer. When it's done.
Yeah,
That's when it's done.
I wish I had a better answer for you, but that's the answer I have.
Well, like 85 of those emails are from Man from Lang himself. He's just emailing you rules questions.
No. Maxine is great. Whenever I have a question, I email her and she gets back to me within a matter of hours. So
I try.
My questions are always answered. I have no complaints whatsoever.
Well, that's not the norm.
Well, it's just nice when you're making videos and I'm working on a script and I have a question. I'm like, I better ask this just in case, because otherwise I'm going to get called out in the comments by.
So here's a question from chat. How do you feel about people using blank cards for void or swarming enemies? I know that this has been something that's been discussed on other podcasts, and you generally feel, I think there's a tweet that Matastrophic has saved and he's posted in our Discord several times about you Maxine saying something along the lines of don't gatekeep yourself.
Yeah.
If that's the way you want to play, then that's the way you want to play.
I agree. Like, wholeheartedly, if that's what you want to do it. I don't feel like that's bad or cheating or anything like that. In fact, I think it's pretty cool. I especially like the empty space / swarming cards that Mythos Pesters made and like had made and distributed. I even have a pack. I haven't used them because I don't get to ever play Arkham Horror, the card game, but they're really cool. And I'm totally fine with everyone. If you want to use them, go for it. Does it make things easier? Sure. Because now you're not losing cards from your deck. Is there an element of, is there something lost because of that? That's debatable. I think maybe, but like only really slightly, honestly. Especially the swarm cards. I think like I've never had more than like 8 swarm cards in play at the same time. So I just don't see it as being like a huge deal one way or the other. Empty space, that's maybe a different story. Sometimes you get like a whole bunch out there.
Now you're gonna get like an angry email from multiple people in the community. I've had 17 swarm enemies.
Swarm cards, my entire deck. Yeah, I mean, it can happen, of course.
We feel your pain.
But basically, they are the way they are right now as a limitation of the medium. That's it. If it was a digital game, I would have just made them be cards. You know what I mean?
I've never really understood why people dislike that mechanic. I always feel like it's no different than it taking cards off the bottom of my deck. Like I wasn't going to see them anyway.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's kind of like, I think the times it's frustrating is when you build a deck that centers around a couple cards and then those cards end up being, you know, in empty space or in swarm cards. And then when that happens, it's just like, well, yeah, don't build a deck around 2 cards. Maybe think about that, you know, like, because that can happen.
Okay.
In Dunwich, they can just get discarded off the top of your deck.
So here's a hot topic question for you. Is 45 the new 30?
Is 45 the new 30? As a Netrunner player, yes.
What about you, Duke? What do you think about are you make the smallest deck as humanly so I can find the pieces I need as fast as humanly possible, or do you build more of a generalist?
Oh, I thought you were asking me how to reckon with my aging body.
Amazing.
No, 30 all the way for me. Sorry.
How about Underworld support forced learning? There you go. 40 card Highlander.
That'd be cool. You
I
know,
did make that deck once.
I posed a challenge to the Twitch chat the other day about, is it possible to make a bad Mandy deck? And out of the woodwork came a Underworld support versatile Mandy deck. Running 1 segment of Onyx.
Nice.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Maxine, you said you never really get to play Arkham. How about you, Duke? Do you ever get to play? Have you played your own scenario and said, why am I so evil? I don't want to kill that baby.
Yeah, actually, did a full pacifist run of Light in the Fog and was like, let's respect them in their home and just take what we need and leave. And that didn't go very well because then they killed us. So yeah, I play pretty regularly for different reasons. So it's definitely the game that hits my table the most. But there are so many. Yeah, I've got a regular campaign that I play with the original group that I used to play back in Chicago. So I make a pilgrimage back there, and we continue our campaign. But yeah.
Oh, what player count do you mostly play at?
Yeah, that was my question.
Well, my original group, we were a 3-player group. But I've played the campaigns through like 2-player with my boyfriend or 4-player with more. So all over the board.
Oh, and what player count do you find the most enjoyable?
Oh gosh, I mean, like, I love playing a 4-player game if we're gonna sit down and we're gonna have the whole evening for this. 2-player is like, a slim number as well. Like, you can finish a game a lot faster on 2-player. 3, you kind of get a good mix of like the extra challenge that you'd get in 4, but also it takes a little bit less time. So I don't know. We've kept our old group at 3 players, and that's been cool.
I see there was a lack of mentioning solo play, which is a very hot topic for us. So,
well, I will say that if you like, yeah, solo is a higher calling. You know what you're getting into when you're playing solo play, and I have the utmost respect for you if you play solo. I'm not good at solo play, but I think it's really amazing when you can pull off a full solo run of a full campaign.
It's true. Vase, have we had a campaign go to completion yet? Out of like the 6 or 7 that we've played so far on stream?
I don't think so.
I think it's funny.
We got pretty horribly.
Yeah.
For the end.
Solo is the true test of a scenario's design.
Yeah.
I feel.
Do you...
Like, you play it with 2 people, you play it with 3 people, you play it with 4 people, then you play it with solo and everything breaks.
Painful.
So I would assume you guys don't really design around solo players as often, just sort of given the nature of the game. Like, more people probably play multiplayer, and that's what you would design around.
I would say, well, first of all, you'd be surprised how many people play solo. I think by my estimation, it's over a quarter, close to a third of players.
Wow.
But I would agree. I don't think we design for any particular player count. I think we just design the scenario the way it makes sense and then test it at different player counts and make adjustments from there. If like solo's not working for whatever reason, we'll make it scale better. If 4-player is not working for whatever reason, we'll make it scale, the other way. And we just try to make it, usually if it works really, really, really perfectly for 2 to 3, it's probably fine for 1 and 4. It's only really ever an issue when the scenario only works for 3 or 4-player. And then you play it solo and you're like, oh, never mind. This scenario is not working.
Have you ever like scrapped ideas because of something like that? Where it's like, I really, you've been designing this scenario for X amount of time, and then it's like, ugh, we just can't get it to work in lower player counts or higher player counts?
It depends. Usually what we'll do, we usually don't scrap anything. Usually we'll just try to include some balancing mechanics to make it so that, like, yes, this scenario is going to be harder in solo, or this scenario is going to be harder in 4-player. And that's just okay, because if there's just a range of difficulty based on players, we're fine with that. It's only if it's like extreme, like it's at the extreme end. And there have maybe been a couple scenarios where they probably were on the extreme end and we should have taken more action, but we didn't. But usually it's just like a matter of, we'll just add a balancing mechanic to make it not as ridiculous in solo. You know what I mean? Without scrapping anything, because going back to the drawing board is usually very bad in this process.
Yeah, I can imagine that'd be just like a lost chunk of development time.
We've done it before. Really, the big issue with going back to the drawing board in game design is by then you've probably commissioned art already. Because we commission art really early in the process. It's like one of the first things we do. So when we go back to the drawing board, we're actually only going like partially back to the drawing board. We're still like, now we're in the confines of this art that is already being sketched out. So it's kind of like, okay, we can't like change direction completely.
It's the drawed board, not the drawing board.
Yeah, like we have about maybe a month or so, maybe a little bit longer, depending on where we are in the process, in which we have like full wiggle room and we can do whatever, and we can scrap things and come back to things. But we're pretty much on rails for most of the design process. We've got to hit our deadlines, otherwise you guys don't get a game in time, and then everyone's mad at me.
Walker of Tales asked in the chat, which scenario was the most onerous? Is that how you say that, Nate?
Onerous?
Onerous to get to Prince?
Oh gosh. I'm trying to. There have been some scenarios that really were difficult to design, but off the top of my head, I'm having trouble remembering. I remember what's the one? The 4th scenario in the Forgotten Age. The really hard one.
Boundary?
Yeah, the one with all the ancient cities. Yeah.
That was probably one of the toughest ones to playtest. We just it kept going back and forth like a seesaw in terms of difficulty. We just could not get it to that middle point. We just kept going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And I remember by the end of it being rather frustrated and finally just being like, okay, you know what? If it's going to keep seesawing back and forth, I would rather it be hard than too easy. And that's part of why it is so difficult. And thankfully, when we went back and revisited it in Return to Forgotten Age, I think we managed to finally get a nice middle ground territory. But until then, I remember it being so difficult to balance. I mean,
yeah, Nate and I love that scenario. We died. No, did we? I died and you succeeded, right, Nate? It was a really close one.
Yeah, it was really close. I've always liked that scenario. I don't understand the community's beef with that one.
No, I think time has been more kind to it.
From a narrative perspective, it's one of my favorites. I really love the locations. I remember also one of the reasons why that scenario took so long to design was I did so much research into Tenochtitlan and Mexico City, and like trying to map it out, even like, okay, if Lake Xochimilco is over here, then what would be there back in like the hundreds of years ago, you know what I mean? And I remember like really taking a lot of time to like get the locations to like writing the art briefs for that was like so difficult. And yes, I know how to pronounce it because I did all the research. Someone in chat was saying, I'm glad to hear someone who knows how to pronounce it. So anyway, like, yeah, that was probably one of the toughest scenarios to design. I think the other one that was really tough was the Search for Kadath. Not because it was hard to develop, like playtesting it actually went rather smoothly, but it had so much story text. Like more story text in that scenario than, actually there's one scenario with more story text, and that's Fatal Mirage. Fatal Mirage has the most story text, I think, in any, by far, in any Arkham scenario. And those two scenarios were so huge in scale, it was just like, it took so long to write. Oof.
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 I wish I had. I don't even have that on the soundboard. What am I doing with my life here? Oh,
you also got to get the monkey karate chop sound that she did earlier. I'm using that for every time I play a monk now on D&D.
Oh yeah, Machinations Through Time has a lot of text too, although that one, a lot of the credit for that one goes to Jeremy. Jeremy was the lead designer on Machinations. And to his credit, every time I threw him a curveball when he was developing that scenario, he took it with stride and just went with it. Because there were so many times where I was like, you know, it'd be really cool if it was this. And I would describe something that was such a hassle to develop, and he would just go, yep, that's cool, I'll do it. And then he would do it, and I'd be like, why do you put up with me?
So here's a question from chat, sort of on the reverse or other end of that coin, is what scenario was the easiest to come up with?
Which came closest to got it and won? That's a tough one. There's definitely been a few where I remember my first draft. It's very, very unusual that my first draft is fun. Like, generally speaking, and I feel bad for my playtesters, and many of them are probably listening right now, because they play the bad versions of every scenario so that you don't have to. Like, that's how playtesting works. And so it's pretty rare for a first draft of a scenario to just work or be good or even like be remotely fun. They're usually really frustrating, really hard, or really easy, kind of broken, and they don't have story text, so they're really kind of rote. Because, you know, Arkham's nothing without the narrative. So thank you to my playtesters for putting up with that. But there have been a few scenarios in the past where, like, the first draft, we're like, wow, that actually worked pretty well. I think the one that comes to mind is the which one is it? Threads of Fate. And I remember being like so surprised by that, because I remember Threads of Fate, I was sitting there like, this is so much different paths and different routes that it's going to be a nightmare to balance it all. And it ended up not being as much of a nightmare because I somewhat cleverly mapped out the different routes to be kind of equal. Like, this one spawns this enemy, this one spawns this enemy. The two enemies are roughly similar in stats. This one spawns a Night Gaunt, also roughly similar in stats. Like, this one spawns a location. It's got this many clues and then takes this many actions to deal with, whatever. And the first time we played it, it just kind of worked. And we were like, oh, okay, cool. Like, that was great.
That's interesting, because that scenario has so many moving parts to it. You'd think that it would...
Yeah. I was surprised. I usually am surprised when a scenario just clicks. Also, like, even the Midnight Masks back in the day, I think that's the scenario I spent the least amount of time developing in the core set. I spent the vast majority of, like, 80% of my development time went into the Gathering. And then maybe, like, barely 5% into the Midnight Masks, which might be surprising to people because they're like, that's the scenario where everything really clicks and they see the full scope of the game and how it can work. with like the non-binary win conditions and the story sort of playing out organically as you play. But in all honesty, the Midnight Masks is kind of just a playground. So all it entailed was make a bunch of locations that are fun, make a bunch of enemies that are fun. Done. That was it. Like, put a value on the act card that makes it so that you can spawn an enemy by spending this many clues, and then the only twist that we really added was the Masked Hunter, which was added like a little bit after the fact, just as a time pressure element, and the putting him actually on the back of the agenda instead of as a separate card was like the thing that tied it all together and made it really memorable. But other than that, as far as design goes, it's pretty simple. Like it's the one all the way on the random end, right? It's not scripted.
Well, here's a question from chat for Duke, sort of on the same line. What's been the biggest challenge working on Arkham Horror for you so far? And is Maxine throwing you any curveballs?
Oh, all the time. It's constantly curveballs. Just never any straight balls.
What can I say?
That didn't sound right.
Unsurprising.
Yeah. Honestly, I mean, I think the way I would probably want to answer that question is like the biggest challenge is how humbled I am by the really cool community and by what Maxine has already built and what the whole team behind Arkham has already built. In that, I'm constantly thinking, oh, this is like my favorite game, and I do not want to do any disservice. Like I just want to bring my best to the game. So I think it's kind of like in my own head where I'm like, oh, I just want to do right by this game constantly.
Yeah, I can imagine that's tough, where you're sort of putting pressure on yourself without really like anyone else doing that to you. But, I think that says a lot about one's character, when you take on and shoulder that responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, it's just such a privilege too. Like, yeah, I keep pinching myself. Am I in that one campaign of the Dream Eaters? So.
Now, Duke has been really great to work with. I think probably the toughest part for Duke, if I may speak for him, has been he's sort of joined in the middle of a project. So playing catch up for a little bit, right? And transitioning onto this team, there's always going to be it's always going to be easier if you're on a project from the start and you get to see it like come to fruition over time rather than being like kind of added in like halfway through. But to Duke's credit, he came on to the team with such an appetite for working on the game that I think just kind of hit the ground running. And it reminds me a lot of when I joined the Lord of the Rings team. So I remember joining the Lord of the Rings team in the middle of a project and just being like, let me help. Let me do this. Can I do this? What if I did this? What if we did easy mode? You know what I mean? Like we just added, I just came to, and I remember like everyone being kind of like, okay, slow down. You're just working on this right now. Okay, slow down. And I just remember being like, no, I want to work on everything. Please, can I work on everything? Can I work on Netrunner too? Can I work on Civilization? Can I work on, you know what I mean? Like, so I guess what I'm saying is, Duke, you remind me of me, but in a good way, in a very good way.
No, yeah, for sure.
And speaking of really good things, we have some news here. Krabby Terror 8, who we'll be seeing in a little while here, has donated $200 to Doctors Without Borders. And also, Redbeard the Ninja has very stealthily decided to ask a question with their donation of $50. Their question is, how do you decide what to include in the Mythos deck between including new mechanics or reusing older sets? That's their question. You do with it as you will. Either way, thank you, Redbeard.
That's tough. There's some effects that are pretty, I would say, like pretty standard that we like to reuse because they work. I would say like test agility and take damage for each point you fail by. Test willpower and take horror for each point you fail by. Test willpower to not lose an asset. You know, something doom. Those are so like cultist enemies that enter play with doom. They're so like standard. And then what we do is we throw variations into them. So in the Dream Eaters, you have the version of the willpower and agility test to not take damage in horror, where the test is more difficult, but you can commit any icon to it, like that kind of thing. Or the versions in Innsmouth, where if you draw a specific token, you automatically fail. Or the ones in Edge of the Earth, where if you draw a Frost token, you take extra whatever damage. So there are some mechanics that we like to keep reusing. And then sometimes it just makes more sense to just use the core set version instead of like recreating it. Because they're already there. Like that's cards that we don't have to design. That's art that we don't have to commission. That's cards that don't have to go into this box that can only hold X amount of cards. You know what I mean? So it's all about a steady balance. Like we can't do all new cards because we'll run out of card space and art space. We can't do all old cards because players will send me angry letters. So it's all about striking a balance. And if we find that it's like, oh, this card is just way too close to Rotting Remains, and it makes sense narratively for Rotting Remains to be in this scenario, we'll just slap that in there. You know what I mean?
And like getting to see a core set, encounter set get reinterpreted in certain ways, like rats suddenly becoming a different thing in the secret name.
Yes.
But I mean, like, you know, then there is also the aspect of theme, which I was a playtester on Edge of the Earth, and I remember trolling Maxine being like, why isn't chilling cold in every scenario? It's cold.
It's cold. Too strong.
It's all cold.
I mean, yeah. There's sometimes there's going to be encounter sets we add only because of theme. And then sometimes there's going to be encounter sets that we that maybe should have been in there for theme, but we didn't add because there's a mechanical reason why we didn't want it to be in there. A perfect example is in a project I can't talk about specifically. There's an encounter set that makes perfect sense to be in there, and I didn't want to include it, or rather, I cut it from the scenario because it ended up being really cumbersome and not working for other reasons. So it's like, it's just about remaining flexible and like keeping all of those tools on hand and making sure that you're not like staying too rigid in your design. That's all.
It's part of the challenge too. Like, I would imagine sometimes there are situations where you want to include like part of an encounter set. Like, I know you've done this with like whippoorwills in the past, where you've reprinted whippoorwills just to include those cards. But
yeah,
you know, is there like are there any instances you could think of like, oh, it'd be nice to like just have Rotting Remains and not Frozen in Fear and not, you know, the other whatever encounter cards come in that set?
Yeah, I mean, the classic example is the Midnight Masks treacheries, the 5 treacheries from the Midnight Masks, where we want to use these treacheries, but we don't want to use those locations because it's set in a completely different area. So it just says, take the 5 treacheries and none of the locations and no act or agenda cards. I think we've also have we done other similar encounter sets before? Maybe we have, maybe we haven't. I don't remember. But yes, like sometimes what we've done in the past is just reprint the cards that we want to use. Like the whippoorwills in Union and Disillusion, where it's like, oh, it makes sense for whippoorwills to be in here. Let's just reprint those cards in there because not everyone's going to own Dunwich. But if it's from the core set, yeah, probably better to just reprint those cards. Or sorry, to just take those cards, even if it's not the full encounter set. It's a little awkward, but like, yeah, I think we did reprint Rotting Remains once, and I remember a lot of people being like, why? That's 3 cards that could have been something else.
And that was in Carcosa, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was in the Catacombs, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think Striking Fear was, I think there was like, sometimes I want to use the voices and the Frozen in Fear, but it doesn't make sense for there to be guts strewn about. narratively in like whatever scenario it is. So it's like, man, like I wish that I had broken that out into its own set or something.
These Parisians don't know how to keep their catacombs clean.
Well, you know, it's all good.
Catacombs.
Yeah, it's fine.
It's fine.
It's not polite to ask a Parisian about their catacombs.
So we have another question from chat here, and it seems like Matastrophic has been rambling off questions all day long, but he asks a very important question here, which is, it's difficult to tell from the artwork, but what nationality is Lola Hayes? Oh, great arbiter of Arkham lore.
Ooh.
I don't know. I think oops. You know, I don't know. I'll have to get back to you on that one. I legitimately just don't know. Is cat fur floating around?
Someone just say Carcosa.
The mystery forever.
Carcosa. She's from Carcosa, yep.
I think I want to say that she's like European American, like an American originally from like gosh. I don't know. I don't want to say anything wrong, so I'm just gonna pass on that one. I don't know.
I have a question regarding the art. What when you sat down to put out the revised core set, which I think has attracted a lot of new players to the game, how did you go about deciding which cards you were going to give a new lick of paint to?
That is a great question and very easy for me to answer. I was told. I did not decide any of those. Our Andrew Navarro, who was our like visual director for a long time, and then later on our basically head of development, was like, okay, if we're doing a new core set, I want these however many 13 cards or whatever to have new art. And I was like, okay. I think the only one that I think I like added to that list, I think there was like one or two pieces I was like, hey, as long as we're doing new art, can we also get new art for like this card and this card? But I don't remember off the top of my head which ones were his choices and which ones were mine. For sure, the investigators were just like, well, we should do the investigators. Like, because that's going to be a driving point. Like, people are going to want new investigator art. So we did the 5 investigators. And then I think from there, it was just like there were certain cards that Andrew just wanted to see new art of. And a lot of the new art that we commissioned were like, hey, while we're getting new art, let's feature these 5 investigators in as many of them as physically possible, right? Or just feature investigators specifically. So the new burglary has Skids on it. The new scavenging has Agnes on it, I think. Mm-hmm. And so on and so forth. Like,
so who's to blame for medical texts? That's my bugbear.
I like that card. It's tough for me because I like almost every single art piece that's ever been made for this game. So even the ones that were swapped out, I'm like, oh, I like that one. You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
Man from Lane just has a personal grudge against any and all cards that heal damage and or horror, but he has clearly not played with any of the new weaknesses from Edge of the Earth because, man, oh man, if I had had some healing in my game, I could have actually moved more than one location the entire game, which would have been good. Which would have been nice. So, you know, I do think that there is certainly some design space to make healing more important than soaking, because I do find that that's often a lot of people's go-to. It's just play soak. It's better than healing, but you know, I think that there is some new cards in the card pool that sort of make you question that a little bit.
That was 100% the intent. So, yay.
Well, I haven't had the pleasure of having my legs or arms broken yet, so maybe my perspective on healing will change once that's happened a couple times.
Leg injury is rough because
leg injury is tough.
Because it's often like you're evading and moving in the same turn, and you can't, and it puts you into this perpetual cycle of, oh, I guess I'm just going to evade and stay here and not move ever.
Especially if you're playing solo.
Yep.
If you're playing multiplayer, someone else can heal you. It's not that bad. But like, yeah, solo, bring some healing. One of my goals has always been to create weaknesses that make you consider things when you're updating your deck, right? Where it's like, oh, this is actually going to change the direction I take this deck in like maybe a very minor way. And for those, it's very obvious. It's like every class has something that heals. So you just slap that in there and just, you know, hope that you can draw it in time to prevent that from happening.
We have a question from Robin9126 for the whole panel. So we'll start with Duke. Apart from the 1920s, what's your favorite era for setting Lovecraftian horror?
Ooh, that's a good one.
There was a campaign that I ran where in the Call of Cthulhu system, where I put the color out of space into a small town in Maine in the 1950s. And I thought it was really fun to like play into that Cold War like panic of that era. And I think it really fits sort of the paranoia and fear of the unknown that's really inherent in a lot of Lovecraftian horror. So yeah, 50s where everyone's like, oh, golly gee whiz, but everything's terrifying. That's fun to me.
Is that what the 50s is? Golly whiz!
I gotta go down to the soda shop.
Willikers.
Oh, what's that tentacle?
It almost has like a Lovecraft country vibe to it in a way.
Part of it?
Yeah.
Willikers. Willikers.
That's amazing.
That's
what about you, Maxine?
I think for me, I think modern, like present day, I think that's my favorite. Just because it's so much easier to connect to the characters and really put yourself in their place and like envision it happening to you. Whereas with like anything, especially anything before the 1900s, it gets to be tough for me to envision, for me to like get into character, right? It's like, if it's like the 1890s or like the early 1800s or golden age of sailing or something like that, like it's all cool. I still want to play it, but I find it difficult to connect to that setting because it's like I've never lived in the I don't know. But when it's a modern era game, especially like a horror video game, I especially love that. I grew up on Silent Hill, Resident Evil, Clock Tower, like you mentioned, Haunting Grounds, like all those games. So that's my jam.
What about you, Man from Lang?
Yeah, the question was for the whole panel, so Man from Lang.
Oh, about when to set Lovecraftian horror.
What's your favorite?
I'll never forget when I played at a convention back in the it was the late 1980s, and they had 2 or 3 tables of Call of Cthulhu playing, and they were all set. You were military units in World War II or World War One or it was World War II. So they had all the tables were set as military units in World War II, and you basically all played the same scenario. And then at the end, everybody got together, and it was a mass battle against one mythos creature that everybody sort of ran into at the end. So you had, and I think we had like, they just threw the barn door open to everything. So people had rocket launchers and tanks, and everybody still died. So I know my friends and I were talking about that one for years after as one of the highlights of our young gaming careers at the time.
It sounds like Mark Harrigan's backstory. Just 20
exactly.
years in the future.
Exactly.
So, quick question about Maxine. Are you a modern Cthulhu, or are you more of like a government conspiracy Delta Green kind of modern day?
Either one. I think my favorite horror settings or games are the ones where you're just an ordinary person, and then you get thrust into an extraordinary situation. So like Resident Evil, for example, that's like my classic go-to horror game that I love. Delta Green, though, like that sort of government conspiracy thing with like a secret paranormal agency, I love that too. Like I love the SCP Foundation like stories. I love like found footage paranormal stuff, like Slender Man style things, like urban legends. I love there's a game on Steam called World of Horror that's like Arkham Horror-esque, set in Japan, and you play as like high school aged Japanese kids going through like Japanese urban legends and like yokai and stuff, and it's so cool.
Yeah,
it's the closest thing to a Junji Ito-esque inspired horror game.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. So yeah, all of those. Yeah.
That's interesting because I'm always like curious to see whether or not people prefer one or the other as far as like those two modern day settings, because I feel like they're very different, even though people don't think they are, but they're very different in tone, I think.
Well, when you get to like the SCP Foundation and Delta Green, there's an element of anachronism there that's intentional, that's like, oh, like it's a secret government agency, so they have like futuristic stuff that you couldn't even like believe. It's almost like it's 20 or so years in the future, right? In terms of like what kind of tech level exists and stuff like that. Whereas, and even like Resident Evil is like that too, and like The Evil Within for sure is like that. So, and that's cool. I love all that. Don't get me wrong. But I think my favorite is the games like Silent Hill, where it's just you with a gun and that thing, you know, like walking through an apartment building and everything's messed up. Like, that's awesome. And yes, I chose apartment building because Silent Hill 4 is one of my favorites.
I mean, Silent Hill is just a great franchise in general, so.
It really is.
Well, except for the new stuff that Konami, we won't talk about that, but.
Silent Hill 1 through
4. Vase, what about you? What's your favorite setting for Lovecraftian horror?
Well, I think you know the answer. I'm a huge Delta Green fan, so it's modern day and government conspiracy type. I think the use of technology, when I first heard of Delta Green, I'm like, how could that possibly work? Like, it seems like it'd be too easy, or like the word would get out too quickly. But it actually throws a curveball into the entire thing that adds just an interesting layer to it. So I really appreciate that. And I do like that whole trying to keep a lid on it just to keep everybody safe, you know, that whole thing. So I really enjoy it. What about you, Nate?
I'm still in a toss-up, man. Delta Green is easily one of my favorites. I've just had so many great moments playing that game and speaking with Dennis and Shane individually. Like, I know a lot of the kind of the inner workings of what's going on with Delta Green. So, like, I do admittedly have a bias for Delta Green, but I've been really enjoying playing Weird West lately. I've been playing basically like a anime-inspired JoJo's Adventure through the Weird West with my group, and it's been amazing.
I love it.
It's awesome. One of my characters is like one of the richest people in the world. So his parents are like steel manufacturers who helped like manufacture the Western Union Railroad and all that stuff. So
nice.
It's been a lot of fun.
That's cool.
And I think we have time for a couple more questions here. So let me just
we started late.
Let me poke my head in here.
Start your whole schedule off.
You know, we haven't talked about Edge of the Earth that much. So I guess I'll just kind of leave this as an open-ended question. Is there anything about Edge of the Earth that you two wanted to say about it specifically?
I mean, yeah, I guess like, so mild Edge of the Earth spoilers. So apologies if you haven't played Edge of the Earth and you don't want to hear anything, you can mute me, whatever. But when we were in the lead up to Edge of the Earth being being released, I remember like one of the big things that I kept mentioning was I hope, because I didn't know. I honestly did not know how players would react to the expedition team and like whether players would connect to them. And because that's what I wanted, right? I wanted players to connect with these characters, really kind of feel like they've gotten to know them so that if and when they get picked off one by one, it's really like it hurts. You know what I mean? Like, and you don't want, you want to protect them. You want them to stay alive because you want to see their stories continue afterwards. And I'm very happy that, from what I understand, like most of the feedback has been, yes, we've connected to these characters. I want to protect them. I've gotten so many messages and memes and stuff of people who are like, oh no, like Ellsworth was the first person to die in my campaign. Like, no, I have to go back and replay it. And like, yeah, someone in chat right now is Edge of the Earth is the first time a board game made me tear up, someone says. And I'm like, hell yeah, that means so much to me, because that was like the whole point, right? Like that was like my entire goal with the campaign, beyond the mechanics and the fun gameplay, was creating story moments that I think are maybe more impactful than they've ever been in Arkham in the past. Yeah, Walker of Tales has a great message in chat. I had a beautiful experience where Dyer died in the plane crash. The single perfect person to die from a horror story perspective.
That's
and
so
yeah,
true.
Like, 100% true. Yeah. So I'm really glad that connection is real, and that players love these characters, because that was like basically my number one goal with the campaign. My number two goal being make a campaign that's truly variable length and that can play anywhere between 4 and 10 scenarios. So yeah, Dr. Kinsler, Ramala's body in the plane crash. Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. I like the reverse one is even more touching to me. But yes.
What about you, Duke? You did quite a bit of playtesting for this campaign, is that correct?
Yeah, actually, speaking to what we've just been talking about, my initial reaction when it was like, wait, anyone can die in the plane crash, was like, is that going to be okay? Are we going to be okay? Are the players going to be okay? But yeah, it creates those moments. Like I ended up coming around and really liking how it created this really potentially emotional experience. And it also makes it so that it enforces that feeling that like no one is safe, like no one, which is a good horror film or horror story idea.
Yeah.
You're never safe.
Yeah, one of my favorite video games of all time is Danganronpa. And Danganronpa spoilers, everyone. Mild. But like, you are introduced to this enormous cast of characters, right? This huge cast of characters, and you spend like a solid hour or two getting to know all of them, what their talents are, what their hopes are, what their dreams are, why they're fun, and you kind of want them all to survive. And then like immediately someone dies, like almost immediately after that like introductory period. And I was like, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. Because right off the bat, and not only does someone die, but the first loading screen, the very first loading screen of the game says like something like 12 students remaining, and you're like, oh shit, what? Like remaining? What does that mean? You know what I mean? Like, so I wanted to give that same sensation of like here you go, 9 characters, and I think my favorite bit of text in the entire campaign is the game text that tells you to pull out the set and read through them one at a time, and then tells you, hey, this is your expedition team. You know, when they take damage and horror, like record that in the campaign log. If they die, when they die, cross them off one by one. Just to like immediately get you into the mindset, like they are not gonna survive. You know what I mean? So yeah. My daughter has a Danganronpa bed cover. Hell yeah.
That must have been hard to balance between like trying to make them feel special and not make them feel disposable in that regard. You know, because it's like I could imagine a lot of players being like, oh, well, if they're gonna die anyway, then I'm just gonna let them die. But I would imagine you kind of don't want to harbor that. You want the players to feel connected to these characters.
Yeah, and it was tough too, balancing it in such a way that the characters feel really useful. Like you want to bring them with you because they feel really useful, but they're not so ridiculously overpowered that if they start dying off very, very quickly, it's a snowball effect where now you're losing every single scenario because you have fewer of them to choose from or whatever. So that was a tricky point of like consideration during playtesting for sure.
And a question for the both of you: which of the allies is your favorite?
Oof. That's a tough one. I think I really like I think my favorite is Elia. Elia is probably the one with the most interesting and coolest backstory, I think. And I won't delve into it too far because that's a bit of a more heavy spoiler. If you want to play, definitely play through it. Play through Fatal Mirage. He's got a really cool backstory, and I think he has my favorite and the most tragic epilogue out of all of the characters by far.
Actually going to also say Elia.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
He's great.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we can ask the Miskatonic University Radio podcast whether their favorite crew member is also Elia, because they have just donated $300, matching the Mythos Busters and Great Old Ones Gaming. Their message to all of you is...
Thank you.
Yeah, and their message to all of you is, thanks to Old Ones Gaming for putting on Horrors Without Borders, and thanks to everyone attending. And our continuing thanks to all the designers, writers, playtesters, and community that make this game great. So, warm thanks from all of them. So, with that puts our accumulated donations at over 2,500. We have unlocked the next prize tier.
Damn.
Yeah.
Wow.
When we have a moment, Nate will tell us all about what's in that prize tier, right?
Oh, absolutely. So we have a copy of the Dream Eaters Deluxe expansion, which I'm sure is a favorite among many players in the community. It's
my favorite.
Ew, there you go. Well, it's Maxine's favorite, so that's the most important favorite. We also have a copy of Light in the Fog, which is fitting since the designer of that scenario is right here. And then we also have a copy of the Edge of the Earth Investigator expansion, which we will be giving away to one lucky winner as well. And we have a couple of copies of starter decks. We have a Jacqueline Find and a Nathaniel Cho starter deck, the perfect after holiday stocking stuffer.
That's right. So yeah, this is all great news. So let's keep pushing. I think 5,000 is within reach tonight, folks. Carry on.
So, Vase, I saw that you had posted a question in chat. That seems like a pretty good question to end this lovely conversation on. So why don't you go ahead and...
And it's on topic for Edge of the Earth. This is from friend of the show, Solar J. Do you think albino penguins have an ulterior motive? And if so, is it as sinister as the whippoorwill's joy in watching us all die?
I like to think of the albino penguins as just being like physical hurdles. You're just like, can you get out of the... I'm trying to get... Stop it. Stop. You're in my way. Just move out of the way. And that's it. I think they're like, just like this brainless lump of meat in front of you. I don't think they're sinister at all. I think they're pretty adorable, actually.
Brainless lump of meat. I'm pretty sure my wife called me that one time. I'm kidding. No, that never happened. I mean, probably will now, but
they're sort of like a microcosm of Lovecraftian cosmic horror, though, right? They're indifferent to whether or not you live or die. They just stare at you, unmoving, inscrutable. You don't know what they want.
They want food, but like you're not the food. They're
what
just
if you
like
were a herring? And
yeah.
Would they be like a Lovecraftian elder god in your view if you were a herring?
Yes. Yes. Return to the albino penguin when?
I'm pretty sure there's some great recipes for albino penguin. I'll have to bust those out at some point.
Can I, before we go, can I answer but not answer Infinite Nutshell's question?
Sure, by all means.
Absolutely.
Do you want to read it?
Absolutely, I do. Let me find it here. My god, it got lost in chat.
I've got it.
Is it the? I've got it here. Is it the now that we have the EU?
Oh yes.
Okay, I'll read it here. So now that we have EOE out and presumably development on the next thing is well underway, would you care to talk about the new one-box campaign format and what kinds of new things it lets you do?
So obviously, I can't talk about specifics. I will say that, as you know, or as you might not know, we work very far ahead. Very far ahead. And the stuff that's coming out after the Edge of the Earth is by far and away, easily, the most ambitious stuff we've ever done and the most difficult content we've ever had to produce. And it's not even, it's by a factor of like 10. But I'm really excited. I can't really tell you anything more. All I'm going to say is that it makes me so happy. so happy. So I'm really excited. No, it doesn't have 10 times the cards in it. No, stop it. No.
That's how rumors start.
I just, the effort. The effort.
It's got 10 times the cards, 100 amount of this.
No.
That'll take Matastrophic Nate and I like 5 years.
Like
300 videos in 5 years. It's just like, and to wrap up the final cards in this expansion, which was released 5 years ago. Here we have card Z.
Card number 3,400.
What do we think about card Z? What was card A again? Yeah. And then somebody will inevitably in the comments say, "Oh, you missed the interaction with card K. How could you possibly forget that?"
No, there was definitely a moment like many months ago, where I remember people being like, "What's the hardest content you've ever had to make? Like, what was the most difficult and time consuming?" And I remember being like, "Oh, the stuff that's coming out after Innsmouth for sure," referencing Edge of the Earth. Like, "Oh, that was by far the toughest content I've ever had to make." And at the time that was true because it was like we were working from home for the first time. COVID was just hitting. It was a big deal. It was a big change for me. I was also going through a lot of personal stuff. It was like by far the hardest content I've ever had to produce. The repackaged box, people saying like, I remember you saying that. I was wrong. Because the stuff that comes out after Edge of the Earth was so much harder. But I think it's going to be worth it. I'm really excited. So, yes, stay tuned.
Well, damn. Not to hype that up or anything.
That's what I'm here for. Marketing would be so proud.
Well,
that is exciting news, though. I think you say you're excited. I think everyone else is even more excited.
Yeah, just be patient. Just be patient. Bear with me. This is going to take a while.
You got Edge of the Earth to play through, like.
Yeah,
we do.
In February. Okay.
Oh.
What? It's coming out in February.
No,
that's a rumor starting. No. Just kidding.
I'll stick my cat on you. She will attack you.
Well, I think Solar J asks the perfect ending question for this, and he asks, "Is there anything that we should read to get us in the mood for the next cycle?"
Oh, I can't answer that. That's too
obvious?
That's too revealing. I can't answer that. But when it's announced, I will answer it.
Fair enough. Can't complain with
that.
I
will remain eerily silent.
But if you want to read something that's totally unrelated to the next cycle, that is still really good and fun, and like probably pretty good, you should read The Key and the Crescent, a novel by M.J. Newman. Shameless plug.
Characters.
Where can people buy that shameless plug?
Where indeed? Well, you can find it on my personal website, www.bewaretheblackcat.com. You can also find it on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, and other digital distribution wherever books are sold. Yes, thank you, Matt.
As like 6 people are frantically typing in the URL into chat.
Which I should be doing, but
that's what I'm here. Hype and announcements.
And what about you, Duke? If people want to follow you and check out more of what you do, you have any social media or anything like that?
Yeah, my website is josiahduke.com, and you can find me on social media as Josiah Duke. So feel free to give me a look.
Well, very cool. Well, it's been a pleasure having both of you on the show. I really appreciate you both taking the time to chat with the fans and just, help us raise money for a great cause of Doctors Without Borders. It's always great having you both on the show. Maxine, you've been on the show numerous times, and Duke, it's been your first time, but I'm sure we'll see you on again. It would be great to have you.
Yeah.
Do my fellow co-hosts have anything else to say?
No, I just
thank you both as well. Very gracious of you guys to join us today.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just wanted to quickly revisit one of the topics we mentioned earlier was that the swarm cards. I had to go back to my notes to check, but the number of spiders I had on the table with my Chaos Gym run was 17.
Oh no!
And I still won. So
that's too many spiders.
It was a lot.
As someone who's arachnophobic, that's too many spiders.
Yeah. So you account for 17, most of my deck being on the table in one way or another. But yeah, thanks for joining us for this this fundraiser. It's always a pleasure.
It is.
Yeah, thank you.
It is my pleasure.
Well, I think with that we're going to take a quick short break here. I'm sure some of us need to step out and stretch our legs, maybe grab some water, take a bathroom break. But when we come back, we're going to be doing some general chatting for a little bit, and then we'll have Krabby Terror off with his Investigator Games episode. So stay tuned, and we will be back shortly.